Greetings and welcome to the Recombobulation Area. My name is Dan Schaefer. Thank you for joining us. The spring election in Wisconsin was just a couple short weeks ago, and while the big headline statewide was on Chris Taylor's landslide victory in the race for Wisconsin Supreme Court, one of the local elections that drew a lot of attention was the race for mayor in the city of Waukesha, where Council President Alicia Halvensleben, a Democrat, defeated longtime Republican State Representative Scott Allen. She will be sworn in as mayor on Tuesday, April 21st, and she joins us here on the podcast today. So, Mayor-elect, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Recombobulation Area.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Great to talk with you. This race was one that we were certainly following at the Recombobulation Area. We talked to you for this feature story, and there's a lot I want to get into. But first, I just want to ask how you're doing, because we've had a crazy week of weather here in the state of Wisconsin. Some flooding in Waukesha. So how are you, and how are you getting up to speed on some of the emergency response duties that may have to go with this new role of yours?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. It's been kind of a crazy week. As you said, there's been a lot of weather, and thankfully, the flood mitigation efforts that we have done over the years, including what we've done between August and now, have been pretty successful. So we did face some kind of frightening moments there, but thankfully the river didn't crest too high. It didn't get to a point where it was really critical. Things seem to have come back down a little bit. Our bridges are safe, and most of our roads are opened back up, which is really exciting. I did stay in communication with our city administrator, so I knew what was going on. All while finishing the last week at my outgoing job. My last day was on Friday. So it's been a little bit weird, kind of doing a little bit of both, but I am ready to step into the mayor's office first thing tomorrow.
Very exciting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like a weather event like that, I remember talking to Jeremy Janine from Urban Milwaukee when I was covering the Milwaukee mayor's race a few years back. And he was talking about how, hey, if an incumbent mayor doesn't do well with, snow removal or something like that, would that move the needle on on an election or something? And it's just, it just goes to show that a lot of these mayoral roles aren't necessarily partisan in the way that we often think of it, right?
Exactly, right? Flood response is not really a partisan issue. And I know that people have talked a lot about my race and about Democrat versus Republican. And of course, there was a lot of that in this day and age. It's kind of hard to have something be truly nonpartisan, but that doesn't mean that the role isn't still nonpartisan. And I want to make sure that I have a really nonpartisan approach to this job. It's not about whether or not you're a Democrat or Republican coming into my office or reaching out for help. I want to make sure that I'm serving all of the residents here in Waukesha. And if that means good flood response or making sure that we have safe streets, I want to make sure that I'm doing it all.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good. So before talking about what's ahead here in this new role of yours as the mayor of the city of Waukesha, let's reflect a little bit on how things came to be. So a couple months ago, we sat down at a restaurant in downtown Waukesha and talked about your campaign, talked about the election. Were you thinking at that time that by late April you would be getting ready to move your office into City Hall?
I certainly had hoped that that's what would happen, right? You don't run for office unless you think there's a possibility and that's what you really want. So I knew that I really wanted to serve my city, that I wanted to serve the residents here, make sure that we had strong leadership in the mayor's office. I'm really thankful that the voters put their trust in me and decided that I was the best fit. But I also knew when we spoke that it was going to be a close race, and it came down to less than 500 votes. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that I'm going into the office tomorrow ready to represent everybody here in Waukesha, including those who maybe didn't think that I was their first choice, and know that I'm ready to step up for everyone that lives here.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through the day of then, through election day. I mean, you got to did you vote in person? Did you get to see your name on the ballot? What was that experience like?
Sure, yeah. So I got up early and wanted to make sure I got my vote in right away. So I did vote in person first thing on election day. There's something about election day, and I always want to encourage folks to early vote because you never know what might happen to you on election day. But I figured if something happened to me on election day, that would be a pretty serious situation. So
Right,
I was
right.
I was prepared to vote on election day. Thankfully, I live really close to my polling location, so I was able to just walk over there, cast my vote right away. And then I just sort of spent my time in this city that I truly love. I went to another eatery here in Waukesha and had a nice breakfast. Had a few calls that I had to make in between. Had lunch at another fine establishment here in Waukesha. Thankfully, we have a lot of options, so there was plenty to do. I had a couple of appointments in the afternoon and did that. And then I was off to what I had hoped would be a victory party, and turned out that it was exactly that. So we had a really great time. We were hitting that refresh button repeatedly, hoping that we would get that news. When it finally came in, there was just a swell of excitement from all of my supporters, as well as myself, of course. So yeah, it was probably kind of a long day, but a very satisfying day in the end.
Yeah, it's such a interesting experience. Not everybody gets to go through something like that, to have vote for, see your name on the ballot, cast that vote, and then celebrate with your team that evening after a victory. So, as the results were rolling in, when did you think that you might actually be the winner?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that this was going to be a tight race, so I don't think that there was any moment where I felt truly secure until every single vote had been counted. But that said, at every moment throughout the evening, as more and more of the districts came in and more wards were reported, I was ahead at every moment. So that was really encouraging. But I knew that any one district could have enough votes in it that it could be swayed. Obviously, as the night went on, we were feeling better and better, but you never know. And so we were waiting to do any sort of celebrating until we knew for sure. But yeah, it was pretty crazy when it was final and I saw my name and projected winner. I was thrilled because I knew that I was ready to be here for my residents here in the city of Waukesha and make sure that we were doing well as a city. And I saw that and I knew that the future of Waukesha was bright.
Hmm. It's a it's quite the thing, that's for sure. And it it's quite the experience. So when you were reflecting on this, now that I think that it's always like history is written by the winners in a certain sense, right? So you look back and it's like you could look at any decision that you may have made across over the course of the campaign, and may have been second guessed it if you came up short, but you won. So all of these decisions that you made get to be viewed as successful ones, right?
Yeah.
So when you reflect on that, what would you say was part of your winning message in the race?
Well, I think making sure that I was explaining to people that while yes, this race is being pushed out there as Republican versus Democrat, that's not what it really was for me. That I've served as an alderperson for the last 4 years and really put the people of my district first and the people of all of Waukesha, because ultimately, while I'm making decisions based on my constituency, my district, I also have to think more broadly. What's going to be best for everyone in Waukesha? And so those are the things that I've thought about for the last 4 years. And it was clear to me that messaging throughout the campaign is what people saw. And I think that's why people voted for me. I don't think that the city of Waukesha is 50% Democrat and 50% Republican. I think that there's probably half, of one and half of the other, but also that middle. So there isn't necessarily a 50%. Maybe it's 40 and 40 and there's some middle in there. Or maybe it's 45 and there's some middle in there, but there is a middle ground. There are people who feel they are truly independent, truly moderate people. And I knew that I had to win those folks over. And I think when you have that messaging of, I'm ready to put the people first, that this isn't about partisan politics for me. This is about making sure that we have good representation and good leadership here in Waukesha. That message resonated with more of the middle than it did from my opponent. So,
yeah, even your yard signs were purple, right? So
yep.
was that an intentional decision?
It was not, to be perfectly honest. My favorite color is purple. But yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, this isn't about red versus blue. To me, this truly was making sure that we were putting the people first. But purple is just because I really love purple. My wedding color was also purple. So it's just my favorite color.
Well, I mean, it works out for this race because I think, part of what we talked about a couple months ago, part of what I think was emerging as a theme in this race and as we see election after election in the suburbs is that these counties, the WOW counties that were the deep red stronghold for so long, have become quite a bit more purple over the past few years. Chris Taylor performed really well in Waukesha County. She even won in Ozaukee County. There are a number of other Waukesha County races that went the way of, some of the more liberal-leaning candidates. There were some Moms for Liberty school board candidates that lost in Menominee Falls. There were some other races, but I think yours being really the highlight there, just really demonstrates how Waukesha County is becoming more and more purple. Did you see that reflected on in the campaign as well?
Yeah, I did. I think that one of the things that is really important is that it's not just to me that the WOW counties are becoming more democratic, that there are more Democrats in these counties. But I think that there's a larger aspect to this. And I think when I say things like, we really want to put the people first, that this is about what's best for Waukesha, I think a lot of people are seeing that not just in the city of Waukesha, but across the board. And when they're seeing the extremism from the Republican Party and from so many members of the Republican Party, I think that we're rejecting that message. People have asked me, what is the real message here? What does this mean for November? All of those sorts of things. I don't think that my race says that there are now more Democrats in Waukesha than there are Republicans. I couldn't say that that's necessarily true or not true. But what I think that it means is that we're rejecting extremism. We're looking at candidates for who they are and what's really going to be best for our communities, whether that's Waukesha or somewhere else. And I think that my race is representative of that. And I think that we've seen a lot of races that are representative of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, sometimes it can take a while for perception to catch up to the reality of how these political shifts unfold. And, the perception of Waukesha County being this deep red county, it can take some time for people to understand how these shifts do play out. So what do people still get wrong about Waukesha County or the city of Waukesha when it comes to its politics?
Yeah, I think that there is a shift, whether that is that we're just being completely inundated with Democrats, or if it means that Republicans, maybe some of our old school Republicans are saying, this isn't really what my party means, or maybe it's a combination of both. I'm certainly no political strategist that can say this is the one thing or what the combination is. But I think that the perception that it's this constant GOP stronghold, that's shifting. And I couldn't tell you exactly why or what it is. But I think that it probably does have something to do with rejecting an extremist agenda. My opponent that I ran against has said some really extreme things in the assembly, has presented some bills that are really extreme as well. Things that couldn't even make it out of committee because his own party thought they were a little too extreme. I think that's the messaging that we're truly rejecting. And I think even if this county, even if we have still a lot of the Republicans, maybe they haven't moved out, but maybe their attitudes have shifted and they might not consider themselves Democrats quite yet, but they aren't willing to vote for that extreme agenda that we're seeing from so many people still on the Republican side. And so again, to me, this is really about what is best for our communities. And what I guess I love that I'm seeing is that people are thinking, what is going to be best for my community? I think that our outgoing mayor, today's his last day, is a really great example of that. He had been a longtime Republican. And when he saw just how extreme things were in Trump's Republican Party, he said, that's no longer the party for me. Now, if you ask him, he will tell you, I am not a Democrat. Like, he is very, very clear about that. But he's also definitely not a Republican anymore either. And I think that we're probably seeing more of that than we are in inundation of Democrats or, Republican flight out of here. I think that there probably are still plenty of Republicans in Waukesha County. They're just thinking, is that agenda what's right for Waukesha County? And I think that what we're seeing both in my race and races around the county is that people think that extreme agenda is not for them.
Yeah, you mentioned outgoing mayor Sean Riley, and I think his story is an interesting one. Like you said, he he was a long time or lifelong Republican who left the party on January 6, 2021. And he endorsed you in this race, which I found to be, a pretty significant endorsement. What did that say to you when he endorsed you in the race, and how was your, relationship with him grown over the years from being on the council to, this campaign and looking ahead as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I had talked to Sean early on, even before I had decided to get into the race, and we talked about what was going to be good for Waukesha, what kind of leadership that we needed, and his whole thing, and not to sound like a broken record, but it really was, what is going to be best for our residents, who's going to put our people first. And I think over the last 4 years, he's seen that has been my priority, that I'm not looking at a vote and thinking, well, what would a Democrat do? And that's how I'm going to vote. And again, most of the things that come before the council, I can't think of a single vote that was along partisan lines or had a extreme partisan angle. But that said, I think that he saw me, right? Mayor Riley saw me really taking a step back, looking at every single decision and making sure that I not only made the right decision, but I had a good justification for why I would make that decision. Not all council decisions are unanimous. So I wanted to make sure that anytime I was casting a vote, that I had a good reason for why I cast that vote. And I think that he respected that. He understood that I wanted to make sure that I was making good decisions based on good evidence that were going to be right for the people. And he ultimately said, after all of that I was the best candidate. And that's of the two. Now, if there was some other candidate, I don't know. It's hard to say. But ultimately, we were the two people in the race. And I think I was the person that really was going to put people first, that it was because I really cared about my community rather than pushing an extremist agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so going forward, has he given you any advice on what it might mean to step into the mayor's chair next year?
Yeah. And what's great is because we do have such a great relationship. I've been able to ask him questions over the last week. I asked him questions during the race, and I imagine that I'm still going to be sending him a few texts here and there for additional advice. But yeah, we had a meeting last week. Where we just kind of went over a few things, just some quick tidbits. He offered to leave me a plant in the office, so we'll see if he did that when I walk in tomorrow. But yeah, I think that I'm really glad and thankful that I have that experience. And I know that I'll be able to reach out and say, hey, this is something I haven't dealt with yet. But he did kind of update me on some projects that we might see coming down the pipeline here in Waukesha and things like that. He's encouraged me to kind of keep some of the meetings that he has, some of these standing meetings on the books, where I'm potentially working with other municipalities and growing those relationships. And so I think those are all great pieces of advice that I plan to take. And I hope that I can build on his legacy. I think that he's done a really great job over the last 12 years. Our city has truly grown in great ways, and I want to make sure that we stay on that trajectory. And so hopefully I have learned plenty, but I know if I have a question, I can always send him a quick text.
That's good. Good to have that. Good to have that number in your phone, of course, for what's ahead here. Um,
Absolutely.
so looking ahead, you're going to be sworn in Waukesha tomorrow. What's next? What's at the top of your agenda as mayor?
Yeah, well, I get sworn in at 6 o'clock, and then my first item is that I have to run the council meeting that night. so, so yeah, I will get back behind the desk
Busy
and
first
run the
day.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I go in actually in the morning, do some paperwork and things like that. But then, yeah, I run my first council meeting as mayor. So technically not the first meeting I have run because that is something that I've done as a council president, but the first one as mayor. So I'm very excited about that. But that's probably not what you were really getting at here. I want to make sure that we are thinking about how we can maintain the services here in Waukesha. We know that municipalities across the state and definitely here in the city of Waukesha are facing major challenges in terms of budgets, especially long term. So while we're financially sound right now, looking ahead to 2027, 2028, and beyond, we know that we're going to face some major challenges. And I want to make sure that we don't have to take broad stroke cuts across everything just so that we can maintain what we've got. So I want to make sure that we're thinking about other ways that we can continue to maintain our services while also staying financially sound. Whether that is me going to Madison and working with our legislators and saying, hey, we need to do better. We need to figure out a way that we are properly funding our municipalities so that we can continue to offer the services that are necessary. So I wouldn't argue that we have too much, right? We want to make sure that we have safe streets, that we have good response times from our firefighters, that we have parks that people can go to that are clean, that we have a library that can provide the services necessary for our community. But those things cost money. And when our hands are tied by a levy limit formula that's very restrictive, especially for older built out cities, and when we have a shared revenue formula, a state aid formula that has been frozen and clearly broken for some time now, we need to do better. So I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work with our legislators and other leaders from other municipalities, because Waukesha is not unique in this. And I think that if we can all come together, really sit back, take a look, say, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. This isn't a matter of just taking a quick boost that's going to get us through to 2028. Okay, then where are we in 2029? We need a long-term solution. And I think that the only way to do that is really to work with our state legislators.
Yeah, it's going to be a big year for a lot of those conversations in some of these, assembly and senate races that are going to be, higher profile this year with the potential trifecta on the line, a lot of attention with the midterms. But I think, the way you're characterizing a lot of this, it is the, nonpartisan work of a local office of a mayor to oversee these types of things. And it's not like there's a huge right left divide over, snow removal or trash
Right.
pickup or these
Exactly.
things like that. So it is the kind of like boring, unglamorous work of local
It is.
government. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And I'm kind of excited to see that we're probably expecting some turnover in the assembly, because this isn't going to be the first time that a leader of a municipality has asked us to fix this formula, right?
Right.
We know this has
Right.
been an ongoing issue. So I guess what I am hopeful for is that we're going to see some new legislators that might be willing to say, okay, you're right. This isn't something that you can keep coming back for the boost. That is not the long-term solution that we're really looking for. Let's go back to the drawing board. So that's what I'm most hopeful for when we're seeing, when we're looking forward to November. For me, what does November look like? I don't know if that means a Democratic trifecta that everybody keeps talking about. But for me, my priority for what I would like to see is legislators that say, yes, I'm ready to fix this formula. I'm ready to help our municipalities and counties so that they can fund the things that we are requiring them to fund, right? These are essentially unfunded mandates. We are required to provide a certain level of service, but we aren't getting that funding back from the state. So I want to make sure that whoever we elect is ready to get to work and make sure that we are funding our municipalities in a way that makes sense. And I hope that that's going to be something that works for the city of Waukesha.
Yeah, I think it's something that we are seeing all over the state. I think it's, counties and municipalities are all dealing with similar budget crunches. And as much as, there are folks who might like to paint this as a Milwaukee only problem, it very much is not. And I think back to, our coverage at the recombobulation area of that 2023 shared revenue bill and debate and all of that. One of my takes on it, at least, talking about some of the Milwaukee specific stuff, was, this isn't perfect, but we need to pass this so we can live to fight another day. Well,
And
that
that's
other day might be here now already.
exactly right. And absolutely, I'm not going to complain about the bill in 2023, but you're absolutely right. It was not perfect. And I also think that you're right that that day might be today. Because when we're looking, like I said, ahead to 2027, 2028, and beyond, we're still facing those challenges. So 2023 gave us a boost. It helped us. It got us through another couple of years. But ultimately, we're looking at the exact same challenges that we were in 2022 and 2023 that we're looking at moving forward. So, and I would argue that I don't want to see exactly what we saw in 2023. That boost, while great, is not a long-term solution. And I think that we need to go back to the drawing board and really think, okay, where are we as a state now? Because where we are now is not where we were 20 years ago. And when I say as a state, I mean, where are our municipalities? Because where we were in terms of growth trajectory for just the city of Waukesha, where we were in terms of green space that can be built instead of redeveloped, those things have changed drastically over the last 20 to 25 years. But I imagine that that's true of counties and municipalities across the state. And so I think that if we can get, whether it's a blue ribbon commission or something that's going to sit down and say, we need levy limits that are going to be practical and work for our municipalities. And we need a shared revenue and state aid system that is going to work for our municipalities. When we have legislators bragging about a surplus, that's great, right? It's a lot better than a deficit, but it's not helpful when municipalities are facing budget crunches. And do we cut a police officer? Do we cut a firefighter? Because I don't think any municipality wants to do that. And I know that we definitely don't want to do that here in the city of Waukesha. So it's a little frustrating for me as a municipal official to hear them brag about a surplus when there are people who are still struggling here at a municipal and county level.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your voice on these issues as they continue to crop up. And I so appreciate you making some time for us here the day before you're sworn in. And congratulations on a campaign well run, and best of luck in what's ahead and your role as mayor of the city of Waukesha.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on today.
Thanks again.
Thanks.